Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch. I am the host of this podcast. And of course, we are your number one podcast to bring you stories around death, dying, grief, mental health, and all the messiness that comes in between with some amazing people who not only walk the walk, but talk the talk out here making a ripple effect in people's lives, changing people's hearts one heartbeat at a time. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, if you know anyone who could benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this along with them. Now, this is a live stream, so you can ask your questions, leave comments. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, before I bring on the next guest, one last thing. This is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Anthony. Anthony, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, before we get started, man, introduce yourself. Tell the audience who you are.
My name is Anthony. Who am I? That's a deep spiritual question when I hear it. So I'll bypass that and talk more about practical things. I'm a mental health educator, coach in peak performance, and spiritual guide, mentor as well. But I didn't used to be all of these things. I actually started my career in engineering. So a bit of a different approach, quite unconventional one. I got into the mental health space because I myself got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I made it my mission to learn more about it and figure out what were the limitations and what were the things that I had to deal with. And throughout this long journey of educating myself and changing my habits to become healthier and more mentally resilient, I was able to quit the antipsychotics that I've been on for many years. So that's a bit about me, a bit about my story, if that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Now tell people where you're from.
I'm from France.
Nice. I love that. We talked about that the last time. I was like, I'm excited because you hear so much about it, right? And I know over here in the US, the mental health pandemic has been something that has been growing rapidly, right? So now it gives me my first question to you. Is it the same over in France as well as different countries, other countries, that the mental health pandemic is starting to unfold on itself?
I think the trend is definitely the same. I haven't lived in France for most of my life. I actually grew up in North Africa and then went to the US and the UK. I was diagnosed with bipolar in the US. So I actually have experienced the US mental health system. And I was put on some really, really heavy medication that knocked me out pretty early in my journey. I know in France, they're a bit less into giving heavy medications, but still quite similar as far as the growth and the impact of mental health. I think in France is a bit lagging in terms of identifying ADHD, for example. I think it's a bit more traditional in the sense of there's a lot of beliefs with the mental health system that it's not really a thing or shouldn't really be as much of a thing as it is than compared to the US, I would say. And the UK kind of fits in the middle of those two from what I observe. But yeah, overall, I'd say the picture is pretty similar.
Wow. Because I know for me, I'm a little bit older now, 50 years old. And I will say, from the time when I was a child, it wasn't talked about as nearly as it is today, right? Like the diagnosis, people just kind of looked at you, and it's like, hey, you're just gonna have to get it together. You're gonna have to deal with it and things like that. And I'm glad to see that is more talked about. What I'm not happy to see is that the medicine that they're putting people on, right? And because in a lot of ways, now don't get me wrong when I say this, in a lot of ways I don't deem it necessary. I think there's other ways of going about helping people deal with the mental health or their diagnosis, like you said, bipolarism, ADHD, ADD, anxiety, depression, all of those different things. I think there has to be a better way of dealing with these things, or having better treatment for these things than to give people what can deem possibly life-threatening um, over a period of time if a person is on them for long periods.
Absolutely. And that was one of the big reasons that I did everything that I could on my own journey to get to the deepest understanding I could. I knew when I was talked about the options, lithium, for example, as a
Mhm.
treatment for bipolar, number one, you need to do blood tests every so often um, because of the maintenance checks. Number two, typically when you're on it, it's lifelong, and it has a damaging impact on your kidney or liver. I forget. I mean, liver, I think, pretty sure.
Yeah,
And this was something that I was just not ready to sign up for, at least not in the beginning. So I've always said in the instances where I wasn't yet fully equipped as I am now with a bunch of alternative understandings and solutions. But when medication options were presented, I said I'm going to go with that one because it's not as damaging to the liver, for example, or not going to require all these blood tests. But yeah, it's a complex situation because in some instances they do have their place. The thing that frustrates me the most is there's a big bias in mainstream mental health care arena to only look at medication. And if one medication doesn't work, then it's another. It's not going to look at a full holistic picture of your life and how you feel and your job and your stressors and everything else that's going on in your life. And that's, for me, my biggest frustration. If I had only known what I know now at way earlier in my life when I was recently diagnosed, I would have had a totally different approach with much more hope than I did trying to figure it all out myself.
yeah. Now, which leads me to my next question. In your research, after you made the decision to say, "Hey, I don't want to do this medication anymore," what was some of the first steps that you took in your research in understanding the different approaches that you could take yourself in order to get off of the medication and begin the process of living a better holistic life?
Great question. So I want to emphasize that it has not been a linear process. I did not get diagnosed, then put on meds, then go, I'm going to take step by step to get off. It was more like, I'm too depressed to do anything until circumstances in my life change. And then circumstances in my life changed. I had help from family. Um, I had just quit a job fairly recently before my diagnosis. And so getting back in a state where I could apply for jobs and get a new job, those were all steps. And I want to give the space that it needs to. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes you can't do anything because your body isn't letting you. And you just got to let time do what time does. Eventually, whether it's because life circumstances change, whether it's because of breakthrough insights, whether it's because of spiritual connection, whether it's because of relationships in your life or something, then, and you get in a place to be more intentional about the work that you can do, then you can make faster progress. And one of the things that I did, when I was in that space of consciously choosing, was to quit all mind-altering substances as much as possible. I used to be a big cannabis user. I used to use psychedelics a lot. MDMA also, go to parties, nightclubs, festivals. And so all of this I stopped for a period of 5 years. The only thing I hadn't stopped was drinking alcohol. And it took a few more life experiences and lessons for me to reduce that. But it wasn't the one that was having the highest impact on mental health, or at least the highest impact that I perceived that it could or would have. So that was a part of it.
Okay. Well, you said a couple of things, and I want to touch on these things because the first one, the psychedelics, mushrooms, right? Because I know now they found some medical purposes with mushrooms, far as helping people deal with PTSD once it's microdose. People who have dealt with severe depression, severe anxiety, all of these different things. They found that if microdosed, people were functioning at a higher level than they had been on medication. And I have seen like the medical reports where people have been able to get off of the medication and, being able to get out into society and go, hey, this is a lot better. It's not everything. It's not as bad as what people made it out to be. My friend Nick is over here. Nick, how you doing, my brother? I'm gonna put this up here real quick. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, man. And also, if you ever get a chance, go check out Nick's podcast too, the Day of Death podcast. Great guy, great interview, and really, really wonderful podcast, man, and an amazing guy himself. Um, but but that's some of the things that I have seen from doctors who have taken the holistic approach in helping people overcome, well, not really overcome, but being able to manage their day-to-day lives, right? And that's just one. I want to get your thoughts on that because since you do have experience with psychedelics.
Absolutely. So actually, the story of what got me into psychedelics, other than festivals, I got into them recreationally, but when I realized what a pleasant feeling state it could be when the situation is managed appropriately. It's important to not do it when you're stressed, overwhelmed, or in a situation where you can get into a bad headspace, because that bad headspace can get amplified and that leads to bad situations. Mm. But when you can use it consciously and intentionally, actually, the experience can be quite nice. And for me, it was a lot cheaper and better feeling than other altered states, for example, alcohol. In those days, I was pretty much getting drunk every weekend because I felt like I needed it in order to either have fun or connect with people. I didn't have this inner confidence. Whatever it was, alcohol was bridging a gap for me. And when I did my own research comparing LSD or mushrooms to alcohol, I found actually the toxicity on the body and the toxicity on the mind is relatively way less than alcohol. And on top of that, it was cheaper. So for me, it was just a functional substance to use to have a good time, enjoy myself a bit more, and all this. And I was very much in control and had less of a downside on the next day. Like with alcohol, when you drink too much, you get a hangover, you feel drained and all this. Some people do get that with psychedelics, but for me, I've always been, if I was going to use a psychedelic, it was very intentionally just the psychedelic, minimal other substances involved. I might have one alcoholic drink, but that's it. So I think people make assumptions that psychedelics are bad because they're illegal. Actually, LSD was invented as a treatment modality. It wasn't discovered that it has psychedelic properties until the inventor tested it for himself accidentally. But it led to a whole period in the 50s and 60s where LSD was legal and being researched for mental health purposes. And there's a lot of positive that came out of that. And in fact, I have dug into the research a little bit myself. And my impression, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but my impression is the good outweighs the bad by a significant factor when we control for the good mindset and setting and dosage, the most important factors that are going to influence whether you get on a good trip or a bad trip.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And also, you mentioned one other thing, which has now become a popular thing within like the last 10 to 15 years, cannabis, right? And, I know people who have been on cancer or have been on cancer treatment, and cannabis was before it became legal, doctors prescribed it, pills, smoking it, things like that to help out with appetite, to help out with the sickness, things like that. And there, like you said, there was a lot of good that really outweighed the bad. There was really no negative side effects, unless you're going to be hungry and sleep all the time, right? Which I've never seen anybody complain about being hungry, especially when you're going through severe terminal illnesses and things like that, because that's the one thing that they want. They want to be able to eat. They want to be able to sleep without being in pain. The body relaxation that came along with it. And myself, I used to smoke a lot of weed myself, right? And it was the one. Honestly, before I stopped, it was my drug of choice, right? And I've never done anything else like coke or any of the hard drugs or anything like that. Just was never my thing. Alcohol, on the other hand, was the one that was always my downside, right? When I look back on my life, every time I've hit a version of rock bottom, alcohol was always played a part in it. And on top of there, once you do a lot of research on alcohol as well, you realize that it's a depressant. It amplifies your depression. It amplifies the things that you're trying to hold back. It makes you very emotional in those aspects of it, right? Now, done in moderation, it can give you, a false sense of confidence. Like, as you mentioned before, going out to clubs, wanting to talk to people, being a little bit more sociable, but then you have those people that it gave a really big, big false sense of confidence where they thought that they could fight the world, right? And you'd have to look at these people and go, yeah, you might want to go sit down, man. Like, I don't want to hurt you, but I will, and things like that. But, not to go off topic though, but cannabis, something that's grown in the earth, it's now widely recommended. They actually have cannabis shops all over the place now, where you can get it medically and recreationally, things like that. So, what are your what are your thoughts on it?
On cannabis,
Yeah.
I think every substance has its unique profile of positives, neutral characteristics, and negatives. I re-experimented with cannabis quite recently, actually, since coming off of my medication, in gummy formats. And at this stage in my life, I found that the negatives did not outweigh the positives, in the sense that, yes, the state was pleasant. I was thinking about things in a different way than I normally would, so I get a bump in creativity. I could probably write some better poetry or articles under the influence of cannabis. My sense of time perception typically slows down, so I'm able to process my thoughts and what I'm doing a lot faster. So that's the good, but the extent of that good didn't outweigh for me the munchies that I get. And I have a bit of an addiction to food, particularly sweets, desserts, pizza, and this kind of thing. And so to be in a state post-cannabis munchies, for me, the extent of that is not worth the little bit of benefit that I get. But that's just a personal assessment. Maybe for other people, they don't get it as bad, or maybe it's not as much of an issue for them. Or the amount of positives that they get outweighs the negative by a different ratio. So, I mean, I'm totally neutral about substances generally. Actually, for me, it's not because a substance has good or bad or illegal status of any sort that I judge it more or less. I just take all substances as what they are. And I think about them in the same way as I think about nutrition. Like a salad is generally better for your health than a pizza, but sometimes you just want a pizza, and that's okay. Like, yeah, similar with cannabis versus alcohol. The main thing is identifying the patterns in your life. Are you using a substance that is harmful and detrimental for your mental health so frequently, so often, and at such a high dosage that it's impairing you from functioning, from sleeping, from doing work, from connecting in relationships? That's the significant thing to look at. Not whether or not the substance is used, but in what intention and depth.
I love that. I love that. Which leads me to my next question. I want to talk about, what can we as people, or what can people in the medical industry change in helping people understand their mental health problems or challenges, and how can we be more effective in bringing more holistic approaches to those individuals without the first thing saying we need to put you on X, Y, and Z, right? And then we'll deal with the consequences of that over time, right? I always feel that there has to be a different approach to this.
Yeah, I think we just need more resources to be spent in mental health generally. Imagine a world where you actually had health and fitness coaches and therapists and healers who were sponsored and covered by insurance, all looking at the same person and their story in parallel to a psychiatrist that was providing medication. That's one thing that's totally different and not existent. The second thing is there's a huge emphasis on labels, as in this or that addiction, this or that disorder. And when we hear these things as labels on us, like, for example, I am bipolar, I don't believe in that anymore. Not because I have not experienced bipolar, but I've reframed it in the sense that I have experienced bipolar. I am not defined by the bipolar. I have it in my life history that I was affected by the symptoms that could be called bipolar. In the same way, this or that disorder, no, you are not that disorder. This or that addiction, no, you are not that addict. You have the experience of symptoms that can be called addiction to this or that. And that already separates this identity piece from just something that is a part of life. And so we widen the gap, it distances fault from the person who experiences it, because it does not define them. And when we start to do that, we can then layer on pieces of knowledge. One of the biggest things that I learned in my journey was to treat addictions or any substance use or even any behavior that could be called addictive, not as an issue in itself, but as an attempt to solve an issue. Meaning, I'm addicted to alcohol as the example. The problem is not alcohol. The problem is the state that my mind and body experiences that I'm using alcohol to escape from. And when we reframe it like that, we can start collecting data for every single time we use it. What's gone on? What is alcohol helping me with in this situation? It's because I feel lonely. It's because I feel down. It's because XYZ. I don't have the confidence to go and speak with these girls. Then we start to create a map in our head that's not about I'm addicted to alcohol, I'm helpless. It's there are certain situations in which I find alcohol to be a relief, and I can break free from those in the same way that I learned to use alcohol to break free from those situations. I can undo my mental programming, or I can undo my attachments. So that's huge. And the big idea here is to have infinite, unconditional love for yourself and curiosity, compassionate curiosity about where does the behavior come from? What problem is it here solving?
I love that. I love that because I was thinking the same, as you were speaking, I was like, I do work with a lot of mental health practitioners and things like that. And these are conversations that we bring up on a day-to-day basis, going, we need to do better at being of service to other people and not placing our own agendas in these areas, because a lot of times where they're coming from is from a place of lack of research on medications, right? And so, it's really important. I think it's really important to be able to explore these things. But now, which poses the question? I just posed this question the other day. I was sitting around with a group of mental health practitioners and so a few other transformational coaches, and et cetera. And I pose this question. I'll pose this question to you. When it comes down to diving deeper into understanding the mental health challenges that people are posed with or being diagnosed with, these days, do we look at it from a chemical imbalance approach? Do we look at it from a mental approach? Do we look at it from a hormonal approach? And if so, where do we start?
This is such a great question. I actually have a book recommendation for where do we start. And I'll say why before I give it. The mind, the body are two inseparable things. And on top of that, the inseparable mind and body is also inseparable from the whole environment in which it operates. And that's not just the physical environment, like the home, the geography, the setting, whether you're in a city or nature or whatever. It's also the relationship landscape. How strong are your social bonds? It's the financial landscape and how you feel about your job. All of this is part of environment and lifestyle. So all of this has a bi-directional influence on the mind and body system. So the long story short is there is no one answer. It's not just hormones, it's not just chemicals, it's not just psychology, it's not just physical habits, it's everything. And so the book recommendation that actually, don't take my words for it, take a Harvard graduate, PhD researcher in mental health word for it, Dr. Christopher Palmer, with the book Brain Energy. And in this book, he proposes a theory unifying all mental health diseases, illnesses, disorders, and unifying them with one single root cause, which is metabolic dysfunction. Now, metabolic dysfunction itself comes from the multitude of causes in which he articulates all of these bidirectional relationships. But that really just shows that the picture has to be viewed in a holistic sense and looking at everything all together and applying multiple modalities in parallel, depending on each unique situation. Some people have a lot of trauma. Maybe they need more trauma work. Some other people need just better diet, better habits. Some other people need something else. And in order to figure that out, you can't predict it. You've got to try, and you've got to make an idea and then start experimenting. And in some cases, medication is warranted and necessary in order to manage symptoms, in order to function, in order to then either do the healing or the learning or improving habits. And then once that piece starts to get in place, then you can reduce medications. But in other people's situations, and Dr. Palmer talks about this a lot, it's actually the stack of medication plus medication plus medication plus medication, which is causing the root of a lot of issues. And so taking some away from the get-go is the solution. The problem is you need medical specialty in order to figure that out. And one of the main things that I want to emphasize, because we tend to give a lot of our power as patients to the medical system, as a person struggling with mental health, you have an opinion, and your opinion matters almost as much, if not more, sometimes, than what doctors are talking about, because you are the only expert about your own life. There's no psychiatrist that's going to get to know you to the level that you know you. That's just impossible and impractical from a time perspective. So you have agency, and you should be empowered not only to learn things on your own, but also to bring things up and suggest alternative ways that you can get their agreements or disagreements and kind of go back and forth. It's a co-created solution, not a you have all the power because you're the doctor expert solution. That
Right.
has its place, but also that co-creation has its place as well.
Right. And
I
I'm
hope
glad
that
that you brought it up. No, you
I
you
hope
did.
that made sense to answer the question. Long story short, holistic approach, tackling everything at once, and basically trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, and which leads it segues into this perfectly, right? Because you said a few things there. You talked about the doctors, and like for me, I I hate going to a doctor, right? I will figure it out. I will change up my diet. I will change up my exercise routines. I will actually look into vitamins and things like that. Reason being, because coming from somebody who was a personal trainer, who was a bodybuilder. Fitness was one of those things that I really just loved everything about it. I loved the way that it made me look. It made me feel, the energy that it gave me, the clarity, the mental clarity, depending on what I've eaten, and things like that, versus, I started cutting out a lot of processed foods. I realized that was a huge problem in it. A lot of processed sugars, although right now I'm having a diet Mountain and everything, but that I do that very seldomly, right? It's the caffeine that I'm looking for because after this, I'm gonna go to the gym and go work out, etc. So for me, it's like a pre-workout, then to drink a whole bunch of coffee. But, and then after that, I have green tea and some amino acids put up in my body and things like that. But now, when you were saying this, all I could think about was mindset that you would have to have in order to be disciplined enough to change those things and learning how to regulate your nervous system. What I found, and I could be totally wrong when I say this, right? So please, what I'm saying, correct me or give me your thoughts on it or anything like that. And anybody have any sorts of thoughts or opinions on this, please put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. But what I found is that there was disconnect in the nervous system for people who were diagnosed with certain mental health challenges like ADHD, bipolarism, ADD, severe anxiety, depression, things like that. And then we'll get into, the more in depth as we go. But what they found is that there was a disconnect in the synapses in the brain, right? Or there was a rewiring of the nerves to certain things, which caused these pulses to happen when they were overstimulated. Which caused a lot of the ailments that people were facing. And so what they found that through good nutrition, through cleaner foods, through fruits and vegetables and things like that. And now I say I say that to say this: not all fruits and vegetables are conducive to how your nervous system acts. There are certain things, far as fruits that are not the best for you, right? Because prime example, too many oranges does what? It gives you you can overdose on vitamin C, right? And so you have to do that in moderation. A lot of leafier greens like kale. People don't like kale, right? Because it's bitter and things like that. But no one really understands that kale actually carries a high abundance of vitamin K, which actually helps heal dead cells in the battery that causes tumors, which leads to cancers, right? Let's see, spinach. A lot of people don't like spinach because it doesn't. They go, oh, it doesn't taste well. It doesn't taste good. And this and that. They want to dress it up with a bunch of salt and all of these different things, and not understanding that spinach is high in alkaline, right, which helps regulate the pH balance in your body. Since your body is 60% water, it helps balance those things out. But people never really look at those things neither. Everybody's looking for the quick fix. But again, these are just my thoughts on it and things that I've researched on it. And so, for me, nutrition is a key part to understanding how to regulate the nervous system when it comes down to dealing with a lot of mental health challenges.
That is absolutely true. Yeah. And a lot of neurotransmitters are actually produced in the gut. There's a really vital nervous system connection, the gut brain axis. And this is hugely important. To go into the specifics of nutrition is a bit too much of a deep dive for a podcast. I think we all kind of know more fruits and veggies and less processed food is the general guidance on nutrition. But what specific thing, whether it's a diet specifically like keto or Mediterranean, or whether it's a philosophy like veganism or not. This I've seen so much contradicting evidence. It really depends. There are many ways to do it, actually, because if we think about it, there were native human beings that lived both in the rainforest and in the Antarctic kind of poles, and the vegetation and the nutrition available in those places are so widely different. So there isn't a one single answer to nutrition. It's actually the mix of what works best for you. But absolutely, it's a key part. And you mentioned earlier mindset, and I think this is definitely worth circling back to. Mindset is a huge piece of it as well. Like, what you believe influences your actual outcome. This is the whole point of the placebo effect. And it's slightly lesser known but opposing twin, the nocebo effect. Basically the opposite effect. You take a sugar pill believing that it's going to do you good, and it will do good. That's placebo. You take a sugar pill believing it's going to do you bad, and it will actually do you bad. So your mindset and your beliefs around mental health, mental illness, that is a huge piece of the puzzle, actually.
See, and I love that because I'm a huge mindset person myself. I get up every day and I have a talk with myself, right? I do a mental checklist with me. How am I feeling? What is my attitude for the day? If it's not in the best of places, I go through a checklist and go, okay, why is it not in the best? Why am I not mentally, in the best of places right now? And I have to put myself in check, right? I have to, before I go out into the world, I am doing this all. Have I meditated this morning? Have I done my stretches? Have I done my breathing exercise? All of these different things. And then I go into, okay, what am I going to eat? What did I eat yesterday that affected my thought pattern today? Right. So I'm huge on making a checklist and making sure that wherever wherever I am, if I'm not in the best, I go back and go, oh, okay, right here, I had that ice cream last night before I went to bed. That's the only thing that changed. Okay, this is why now I'm right here, right? Okay, I know not to do that again. I know not to do that again. So I'm holding myself accountable for these different things. And then once that is established, I go out into the world and I'm excited to go out into the world because now I'm looking at the world through different eyes and going, okay, you know, I can now take baby steps as as people approach me, as I know what I'm supposed to do, right? As I show up in these different moments and things like that. With the thought pattern of I'm obligated to people, right? To give them what I carry, right? I work in grief. So, and you mentioned something earlier. I want to circle around to it, the healing aspect that comes along with it, because I don't really think people grasp the understanding that when it comes down to your mental health, a lot of times people cover up trauma, they cover up the abuse, they cover up their grief and things like that. And grief has a strange way of changing the way that your body responds, to the day-to-day or moment-to-moment activities, which can in turn, we have done research, there is a connection to the mental health challenges that people develop over time.
100%. I think trauma is the most underlooked, underappreciated, and unknown root cause
Mm,
of so many of the world's problems today. And whether it's because we consciously hide it or whether we unconsciously hide it or just unconsciously don't know about something that could have been traumatic. There is a big blind spot. I was myself one of those people that until 28, 29 years of age, I believed that I had never experienced trauma because I had the belief that trauma was only these big bad things that could happen, like war, assault, being bullied, whatever it was. And I hadn't, being in an accident, for example, and nothing like that stood out to me. But it wasn't until I learned as much as I could, I did as much conscious mind work that I could, and I was still seeing repetitive patterns in my life. And the patterns showed up as binge eating. I was diagnosed with binge eating disorder. And this was after, years of work on my weight. I used to be an obese kid. On my nutrition, my exercise, my mindset, my self-belief, my peak performance habits, my distractions, my purpose in life, all this stuff. And I had let go of smoking weed. I had let go of drinking alcohol. I had outgrown video games. I had let go partying or to feel like I belonged in a social setting. I had let go of so many things, but food is essential to life, and there were certain circumstances that led me to binge eating. And so I couldn't solve this one because it was not possible to just let go of food. It's not, it's not a thing if you want to live. And that led me to the road of realizing, okay, if there's a food addiction, then it's coming from something psychological and something subconscious. And that led me to discovering trauma. And that led me to actually having conversations that I would have never had with family about things that have happened in my past that I was completely unaware had ever happened. And it wasn't my fault for being unaware. It's just I didn't have the symptoms to work with, and it wasn't the time of my life to care about it. But in that moment, once I started making that investigation into it, I discovered there was a whole big area that was very much underlooked. And yeah, this was absolutely a revolutionary part of my mental wellness journey.
Oh man, I love that you said that, because now it segues right into my next question, which, as you were speaking, I was going, there's a connection when it comes down to food, right? And I know you said, when it comes down to the essence of life, food is essential, right? But so
Yeah.
is fasting. Fasting, that we find that it does have this ability to help repair cells. It has this ability to help you dump toxins out of your body that builds up over time. Now, which leads me to, the chemicals that we find in food and the connection to mental health, the red dye number 40s, right? The blue dyes, the yellow dyes, and things like that. And what they have found that in children and even in adults, there was an abundance, there was a buildup of these chemicals that were affecting people in the most negative ways. Now let's break this down. Like if we go back a little bit, where did this all start? It comes in our cereals, right? It comes in the day-to-day, things that we drink. Like the lead in the waters, things like that. That's why it's important for you to have a good filter on your tap water system, or something like that. Learning how to not want to have that lollipop, just because it looks good and it smells good may not always be good for you. And so it was the buildup of these things, like say for instance, like flour and stuff. These are things that people use on a day-to-day basis that they don't think about, right? Flour is, bleached flour actually has chemicals in it that is very detrimental and has been linked to cause certain ailments in your body, right? Which in turn increases your want or the feeling of wanting certain things, and so it becomes it's just like the automotive industry, right? Everything, insurance, tires, all of these things all work in coincidence with one another. But so as does the food industry. That's why I'm a huge believer in understanding the connection in those things, right? And understanding how you can use food in a positive way, but understanding what it does to your body as well, right? My belief is, keep it simple. Keep it real simple. Don't overcomplicate your nutrition. I'm a huge fisherman, right? Anything about fish, that people know, the biggest thing about fish that people know is that it's high in omega 3s or omega fish oils, right? The more pink meat that you have, like from salmon or tuna and things like that, the greater the omega oils that you get, which is good for brain function, which is good for heart function, the connection in your gut health, right? All of those different things. So I don't buy fish out the store. I'd rather go and fish for it, and things like that, and process my own food that way. Beef, things like that. I try to steer away from beef. I eat more cleaner meats like deer, elk, buffalo, ostrich, or chicken, but I don't buy chicken out the store. I have a butcher. So I go and say, hey, I need 5 chickens, and things like that. I pay that man. He'll go and slaughter them. I know where it comes from. He processes it. I know that it's clean. You know, beef and things like that. If I wanted beef, I can go to a local farmer and we could pick out the cow. I'll take it to a slaughterhouse and let them process it that way. But other than that, I would rather go out and hunt my deer or my elk or the buffalo and things like that. And I know how to process it myself that way. That way I can take off the fat and things like that. I know where it's coming from the time that I shoot it and process it to my table, type thing. But again, these are just things that I've put together. And you said something earlier, and I just want to reiterate that what works for me may not work for everyone else. And it's important that people find what works for them in the best, healthiest way possible, right? And stick to that, but also not being afraid to change it up as you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of avoiding some of the grocery store stuff, because there's all
Mhm.
sorts of preservatives and chemicals and stuff that they do for just commercial purposes. And that's not so great for the body, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, the experimentation also is key. We all, like, food is such a complex topic. We all have our different upbringings. We all have our different cultures.
Mhm.
This has formed our taste buds, our psychology. We also have different lineages, which has predetermined some of our kind of digestive enzymes, and foods that we are more able to take than others, at least compared to different cultures around the globe. So those are all factors in there. And then it's also a feel good thing, and it's a cultural thing, and it's a societal thing. So, if you want to optimize for having your dream body, then you can force yourself to follow a very strict diet, and maybe you'll get somewhere for some time. But the question is, are you able to make that sustainable? And is that diet for that result of a body or health level sustainable for you for a long term? Because if it is not, then there will be consequences and yo-yoing. I experienced this firsthand myself. The lowest weight that I ever achieved was because I was forcing myself with intermittent fasting and a very healthy, clean diet. And you know what? After a certain amount of time doing that, my first really big binge eating episodes happened because I was putting too much pressure on my system, forcing myself to be a certain way for a certain goal. Now I have a much more balanced approach, and it's not, I haven't achieved the perfect body, perfect nutrition, or perfect health. It's something that I'm continuously working on, both as a coach and as ongoing medicine for my mental health journey. But I'm considering, at the very least, the impact on my social life, family relationships, culture. If I had to take a diet that rejected a big part of my culture, do I really want to do that or not? Those are legitimate questions. And other questions to ask is this optimization the one that makes the most sense right now? Or are there other factors in life, like my self-belief, my mindset, my job, my lifestyle, my exercise, and other things that might be more effective in getting me better and bigger results in my mental health journey? So all of those things are to be taken into consideration.
I love that. I love that, which leads me to my next question about your work. As being a coach, what is one of the biggest challenges helping people find those healthier solutions in their journey of becoming mentally healthy, spiritually, emotionally, and physically healthy? What are some of the challenges, biggest challenges that you see, and how do you approach helping?
I think one of the biggest kind of unsolvable challenge is really the question of determining values, in the sense that if you want to achieve a certain goal, maybe it's going to take a certain set of habits, but the current version of yourself doesn't value those habits or finds resistance to them. Like, for example, if people want to have a glass of wine before or with dinner, or as a way to unwind from the evening, I'm not here to tell you what to do or not do. You are the one that has to pick whether you value this enough to keep it in your lifestyle or not. Now, what I can do is tell you about the trade-offs. Yes, it's going to extend your feeding window. It's going to put pressure on your digestive system. It's going to impact your sleep quality, even if you get the same amount of sleep. So the question is, given all of this information, do you want to change it or not? And that's not on me to make that call. I'm also not one that goes super deep into nutrition, simply because there are 20 other things that I look at that have to do more with personal performance, mindset, productivity, purpose in life, spiritual connection, and all of this. And before optimizing for diet, there are some basic knowledge that should be shared with the world and will help with mental health that might help more than optimizing diets to the nitty-gritty detail. And maybe by the time that you've gone through having all this 80% knowledge and optimizations, you might be able to decide on your value about whether or not to have that glass of wine. But to decide before you have the knowledge and a more full picture, the holistic picture of what contributes to your mental health picture currently and how to improve, it's not really making sense to try and predict or decide in advance. There's a whole journey to go through, from understanding what the root causes of mental health are, to going through creating your dream lifestyle, whether that is your dream job, your dream work-life balance, your dream purpose, your dream situation in terms of family, relationships, material possessions, what motivates you, your creative activities and endeavors. All of this stuff is a factor, and your traumas and healing from your traumas. So all of that needs to be looked at the same time, and possibly with the help of different practitioners, in order to have a better understanding of what's going to help you the most.
I love that. I love that, man. And I love the fact that went in that direction, and your approach to all of these different things, especially when it comes down to helping other people understand and giving them the facts, the resources that you've actually studied and went, look, you can do this over here, but let's look at, let's see if the risk outweighs the reward, right? Type thing. And then I'm going to allow you to make that decision moving forward, because we both know, as well as a lot of people on here know, unless a person makes those decisions on their own, it's just throwing a rock in a tornado, right? It's hoping that it hits something, instead of going, hey, let's look at the deeper issues that's going along with this and begin to take the baby steps. Which leads me to my next question. How important is it to have a journal to keep track of, what I'm saying, of the progress, as well as the challenges that come along with that, so you can have a documentation of your journey?
Thank you for that question. First, I want to acknowledge what you said about baby steps. I think absolutely that's a really important point, that change happens in baby steps. The brain has billions of connections. And so if we think about improving mental health symptoms from a brain connection perspective, we're talking about rewiring a certain chunk of billions of connections. We're talking about strengthening areas of the brain that are smaller in some people than compared to neurotypical. And so in order to actually rewire, it's going to take a lot of baby steps that pile up on and on and on. And so one of the huge important pieces of the puzzle is appreciating the compound effects and not being discouraged, not being stuck in the cycle of helplessness, that we don't see results from today to tomorrow. We don't see results from tomorrow to the day after. We see results only when we have enough time to look back on. And I think this ties nicely to the question about journaling. I'm not one to prescribe, but I think journaling is a fantastic tool. I think it's such a easily accessible tool. It would be in my prescription of natural solutions to mental health. I'm a big journaler myself. I actually have two journals. I have one general journal which I use for general storytelling, brain dumping, a little bit of what are the 3 most important items on my list for tomorrow, and make sure I get those done. And just processing the day, processing the week. Whenever, I don't do it every single day necessarily, but when I have the feeling that there's stuff in my head, that's when I feel the need to journal, because it's like, okay, what happened this week, this month? How has that changed me? What can I learn from it? All of that is a fantastic tool, rooted in positive psychology and definitely backed by science generally, and peak performance flow neuroscience more specifically. The other journal and tool that I use is a gratitude journal. And I keep this journal specifically for gratitude. And I've been doing this only for the last 6 months. But every single day before I go to bed, it's my ritual. I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And if someone is stuck in a depressive low, you can write the same things every single day. You can be grateful to be alive. You can be grateful to have a roof over your head. You can be grateful to have drank some water. You don't need much, but if you do it and you do it consistently, you're going to start rewiring your brain to think in a positive way. And that's going to have a positively self-reinforcing cycle, which is going to get you out of the depression. Maybe it's going to get you up enough to go for a walk. And that walk is going to give you energy. And that's going to put you in a good mood. And it's just a chain reaction. And that's the whole point. You need as many tools for as many positive chain reactions in your mind-body system as you can if you're going to overcome mental health issues. So yeah, highly recommend journaling and gratitude, both of which are incredible tools with very low cost and very low effort to do and massive rewards.
I love that. I love that. Now, as we begin to wrap this up and things like that, I have two more questions for you. First question is, how can people find you?
I have a website, which is www.palacin. That's my last name, palacin.co.uk. That's the easiest way, I would say, to find my other links for a stranger. And otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Those are the top few social media platforms that I use. You can always find me there and give me a follow. There's an old profile on Facebook that I lost access to, actually because of my bipolar delusions. So the Facebook link, which is correct, it ends with Anthony Palacin coach. The one that ends with Anthony Palacin without the word coach, that is a profile that I lost access to because of my mental states, and I can't really do anything about it. But yeah, I'm happy to be followed, connected with, messaged on any one of the platforms, and I'll be here for you.
All right. I love that, man. I love that. Second question. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, I have a really kind of boring one, but actually, I don't really need a superpower in the sense of like flying or stopping time or reversing aging. I actually love my life. So the superpower that I would love to have is to be able to flip a switch and put myself into sleep right away.
Oof.
Like just to be able to say, okay, it's 3 p.m. I need to wake up by 3:30. Boom, flip a button and fall asleep immediately. That would be so cool.
I think you just made everybody else's superpower yours as well. Because I know people out there like, I can't sleep. You
Yeah.
would love to be able to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So, man,
And sleep is so important. In
yeah,
my peak performance training, you know, it was mentioned, if you're trying to optimize how to fit more into your day or what supplements to use or blah, 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 and you haven't optimized your sleep, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. Sleep is your number one superpower first, and then everything else, optimize
yeah,
that after. But sleep is so huge for human performance and mental health and just feeling good in
yeah.
general. It cannot be overstated enough.
Oh man, sleep is really important. Especially for somebody like myself and a lot of other people like myself. Especially I'm back in competition mode. I'm working out, I'm eating, and sleeping is when you grow and recover the most. So it's hugely important to me, as well as the diet that I'm on. To making sure that I'm disciplined enough to go through what I need to go through in order to achieve the body I want to achieve. Mindset is everything. Discipline is, falls right in the line with that. And now with that being said, man, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your journey, your story. It's such an amazing and intelligent conversation and and with someone who has firsthand experience. For everyone else out there that have been listening, if you love the conversation that we've been having, do me a favor, go and follow Anthony and let him know that I sent you over there. Get the help that you need and the support that you deserve from someone who's out here doing it, has done the research, and is out here changing lives, man. One heartbeat at a time, as we always say, one heartbeat at a time. We're changing lives. And for everyone else who have not already, do me a favor, head on over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, maybe these conversations aren't for you, but maybe you do know someone that can benefit from the conversations that we have. Do me a favor, share it along with them. Let them know that we're out here having these conversations, and they could be very, very beneficial for them. And again, thank you to my guests that have come on and given me his time and his knowledge and his wisdom. And shared this beautiful, amazing conversation with me. And for everyone else, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. I got one coming up at 3:30 today, 1:30 Mountain Time. So tune in for that one. And we're going to be giving you some updates on the upcoming conference that we got coming up in April. So, guys, keep your eyes out for these things. Anthony, again, thank you for joining me. For everyone else, we're going to see you guys in the next one. We're out. Peace.
Thank you so much.